The elements of the royal art. In the early stages of learning their craft, artists typically master what are called the tools of their art. The tools of the royal art are both simple in essence and profoundly deep in implication. These simple components, which can be counted on one's fingers, form an interrelated family of ideas whose interdependent relationships provide the underlying structure of the entire system. Here, they're represented in symbolic form as simple objects with profound meanings. Here we begin with the rod. Imagine the rod as a budding branch from the tree of life. This branch represents both your connection to the greater processes of life and the original organic driver of your consciousness. The energy it activates is the primal libido of your innermost nature. Symbolically, this branch embodies the individual's true will, the active aspect of their being, the essential element that drives us each toward our aspirations. It is the divine force desiring to fulfill itself by fulfilling all the needs embedded in one's nature. Next, we move to the cup. Imagine this cup as a divine chalice, sometimes known as the Holy Grail. This cup represents silent meditation, during which the mind becomes a vessel open to receiving. By its shape, it indicates that it is open only to that which is up above. It collects higher energies and transmutes them into gnosis, or understanding. The nature of the cup is reception and reflection, most often achieved through states of contemplation. Symbolically, this cup embodies the power of understanding. This understanding is the reward of experience and results from the mind's unconscious synthesis of collected energies and develops into a power which might be called integrated awareness. The meditative practices that are connected to the symbol of the cup result in moments of illumination, a deepening of one's intuition, and an awareness of the profound mysteries of synchronicity. Moving downward in hierarchical fashion, we come to the sword. Imagine this sword as your mind, a razor-sharp cutting instrument. In traditional symbology, the sword is conceived as a dutiful son faithfully serving its father, which is the will. The sword represents analysis, the intellectual faculty that adopts actions to ends. The powers of the sword are the qualities of intellect, which serve to demarcate boundaries and limits, recognize distinctions, and give a person the ability to reason objectively. The sword is a weapon of discernment and represents the power of decision. It is the weapon we need to make hard choices with enough boldness to face their inevitable consequences. Symbolically, the sword embodies the powers of reason. It is not only razor sharp, but as a symbol of the mind, it is lightning fast, quick as the wings of thought, able to move in any direction, and span the distance of the universe on wings as quick as thought. The point of this sword is aimed at efficiency. The sword guides our actions by cutting away threads of unnecessary entanglements that might squander the energy of our will. It can be used to cleave problems, cutting them down into more manageable parts. The sword is our ally for practicing good judgment. Judgment begins with knowing yourself, your abilities and biases, as well as those of other individuals. Last, in the descending hierarchy of the 4 central tools or weapons of the royal art is the coins, sometimes referred to as the pantacle. Imagine the coins as the life of earth and all its fruits. Principally, they are the manifest current of all tangible things, the swirling material of physical existence, endlessly changing hands and changing shape. Symbolically, they represent earth, the material we build with, including our physical body. The coins represent the practical principle of spiritual power. They are both the material we work with and the medium through which we work in this life. Their circulation is the interplay of events and circumstances, representing both causes and their effects. Managing this power requires a good deal of common sense, which means grounded knowledge of what is and what is not possible. Symbolically, the coins embody the nature of gold and currency. Developing this element is the science of economics, the art of tracing consequences, and recognizing the inevitable implications of our actions. properly applied, it represents determined action and purposeful behavior directed toward a given end. Strategy is the art of forming circumstances to increase one's wealth of positive experiences. The coin brings to mind the need for prudence, mindfully tending to our business, carefully considering our choice of investments, which, at times, also means making appropriate sacrifices, setting aside some goals in favor of others. Mastering this power means comprehending both general and secondary consequences as we trace the effects of our actions from the short run to the long run. It is through an astute attention to fluctuations of both increase and decrease that cultivates this force. This involves a careful calculation of probabilities and an ability to accurately estimate the real value of both possessions and positions. Another key tool of the royal art is the incense burner, sometimes referred to as the censer. Imagine the incense burner as the world of imagination, the ethereal current that lies between ideas and reality. It's on this plane that manifest things begin to take a recognizable shape. The incense burner represents the power of one's creative imagination, that evocative medium through which potential creations first take form. Like wispy clouds of smoke that take on a momentary form, this dream world is where one is free to envision the future they wish to create without being burdened by its necessary details. It is in this world that things can be seen that are not yet real. It is exceedingly important here to be able to distinguish between those things we dream that have the potential to become real under the proper circumstances, and those things which could never become real because their present qualities are too ungrounded. Symbolically, the incense smoke that arises from the incense burner is the astral plane, whose imagery and inspirations desire to poke through the unconscious veil of the mind and make their presence known. We all experience states of imagination. We enter and exit these dreamlike trances, both by day and by night. They are those moments in which we're taken away to far-off internal worlds, both frightful or alluring, where our deepest fears and greatest fantasies can be experienced without ever even being materially manifest. This mental world is like a drafting table, not only of madmen, but of artists, builders, geniuses, and prophets. Another symbolic and fundamental tool of the royal art is the scales. Imagine the scales as the ongoing dynamic of yin and yang, symbolizing the qualities of coordination, cooperation, and balance. It is this faculty of balance and the ability to perceive imbalances which represent the individual's attentiveness to fluctuations of equilibrium and balances of power, along with nature's continual desire to rectify gross imbalances. The scales are also used in the weighing and measuring of things of value. The scales are an instrument that distinguishes brass from gold, symbolic of the development of the individual's own internal process of valuation. The development of this faculty means the individual is proficient at assigning rank to scales of values and scales of preferences. The scales also represent considerations of exchange and trade, along with the economy of both mental and physical states. All of life goes through phases of ebbing and flowing, waxing and waning. How do we make the most use of life's natural fluctuations of energies, in currents of energy and currency, in value and values? Symbolically, the scales also embody the power of objective judgments, the weighing out of important considerations. If we are to build a wealth of worthwhile experiences in life, then we must take into consideration the exchanges we make along the way. Implied in the scales is also the notion of justice, as in developing the objective faculty of good judgment. What will the poor exchanges and choices we make today cost us tomorrow? How can we increase our wealth and energies without upsetting the balance of life? The scales are scales of balance, and this implies the ability of keeping one's head. Good strategy grows out of an independent and careful assessment of the situation, harnessing individual insight to a carefully crafted purpose. Here, the scales become an essential tool. Next, we come to the symbol of the hourglass. Imagine the hourglass as time, the all-pervading limitation of life, as well as the force that naturally brings things through processes to their completion. The hourglass represents the fundamental principle of scarcity. In choosing to satisfy certain ends, there are others which must go unsatisfied. All of life takes place under the constraints of time. Man's physical life is not immortal. Our time on earth is limited. Symbolically, the hourglass embodies the powers of time as the means life uses to arrive at its ends. The necessity imposed on life by the limits of time highlight the need for choice. We must choose among ends, determined not only by the resources available to us, but also accounting for the time allotted to attain those ends. Next, we approach the board. Imagine the board as the landscape of earthly and human interaction. The features that indicate various opportunities and threats, the quality of your plans and move choices that may possibly increase your position and aims in the game of life. The board represents the need to evaluate certain positions depending on circumstances that make a move more or less valuable. Like chess, the game of life moves through 3 distinct phases: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. These reflect the 3 stages of life. The opening includes our childhood through to our early adulthood. These are our first moves, a time when we begin a logical development of our pieces. The middle game represents our transition into middle life, characterized by increased complexity and an ongoing struggle for positional and material advantage. If the game, or life, lasts long enough, play then transitions to endgame, which is characterized by attempts to deliver checkmate, which is a lasting positional advantage and the attainment of long-desired ends, which might be considered as ultimate life goals or establishing a legacy. Symbolically, the board embodies the powers of long-term strategic thinking, a mastery of tempo as a description of time measured in advantageous moves. It speaks of the number of moves it takes to accomplish something efficiently. With each wasted move, our opponent, here time, gains an advantage. We want to avoid losing momentum by making every move count toward our ultimate goal. Lastly, we come to the symbol of the dice. Imagine the dice as risk, the omnipresence of uncertainty, the unpredictability of both human nature and natural phenomena, as well as man's insufficient knowledge of all the forces at play in the universe. The dice represent the fundamental implication that this world is full of uncertainty, the ever-present possibility of error in action, the inability to predict the future course of the world with precision. Recognizing that permanent security is an illusion can help us to be more daring. Life involves danger and risk, which demands of the individual a good degree of courage. Symbolically, the dice embody the power of luck, chance, the hand of fate, and the wheel of fortune. Because the influence of unknown factors cannot be accurately estimated in our calculations, they represent an eternal truth that luck and chance play a significant role in our lives, and that a certain amount of risk cannot be eliminated from our plans.